what we call as self-improvement. Self-improvement is a big business all over the world. The number of books which are sold in the name of self-improvement is maximum. Neither any of the spiritual texts, holy texts, they have that much popularity compared to self-improvement books. Millions and millions of books are sold because people want to improve the self. Now, what is the self we are speaking of? The self we are here speaking of is personality, the person. And this personality improvement, we project as self-improvement. And this self, I call it as SELF, S, small s. It's actually what we call as ego. I am the body, I am the mind, I am the intellect, is called the self. This self improvement you can do a lot of ways. If I am the body is the self, I can go to gym, I can train myself, I can look handsome, or I can use some cosmetics, look beautiful. There's a body as the self. Then the mind as the self is there, where worries, anxieties, how to handle worries and anxieties, how to meditate. So these are some of the practices for self-improvement as the mind. But can really self-improve? That question we have to address. Everything in the world is constantly changing. The body is changing, the mind is changing, intellect is changing, the so-called self is also changing. You are not the same self last 1 year back, yesterday, today morning, everything changes. Your body is undergoing change, mind is undergoing change, intellect is undergoing change. Then what self you are trying to improve? The self-improvement is a constantly moving target. We can get a temporary relief, but self itself cannot be improved. In the sense, improved to the perfection. We want a perfect self, which is impossible. So, everybody's journey of life starts with a self-suffering. We suffer in life because we identify with the body, mind and intellect, and we suffer. Self-suffering is the beginning of journey of life. And we look at the world as cause of my suffering, and somebody is causing me suffering. So, always is the other person who is causing me suffering. We look for somebody or some situation causing me suffering. Because of this person I'm suffering. Because of this situation I'm suffering. So that's our beginning. Then self-improvement, then self-suffering. Some people say, oh, this is suffering. Let me improve myself. The suffering is not caused by other. It's my own internal state. Let me improve yourself. That's where they start going self-improvement books. How to stop worrying and start living. And lot of books are there which will help. Some tips will they give and they try to improve themselves. They are actually slightly better compared to people who are self-suffering and identifying others as the cause of their problem. There's no other person who can cause you problem. They can cause problem, but suffering is your own choice. So you have to understand the difference between pain and suffering. Somebody can cause you pain, but suffering is what you have taken up. It's your choice. In self-improvement, we are trying to reduce the suffering. Pain is caused. So how do I reduce my suffering? So that is the teaching of many of the self-improvement books. Definitely it helps. It gives a relief. Now instead of blaming somebody, you start understanding how I can improve myself. From self-improvement, people now start moving into self-transformation. Oh, improvement is not sufficient. I have to transform myself. The deeper transformation is required. That's called self-transformation. And people who get into self-transformation, they get into teachings like yoga, meditation, and enlightenment practices, which are required for self-transformation. Then from self-transformation, the self-transcendence is required. So people come to understanding self-improvement is temporary, Self-transformation is temporary. Self-transcendence has to be happen. What I call myself, it is body, mind, intellect. I have to transcend it. I have to go beyond that. And that is called self-transcendence or enlightenment. So those who come to self-transcendence are already on the higher plane of spiritual journey. So beyond self-transformation, self-transcendence, there is self-realization. Now there's nothing to transcend also. I am the real self. And the real self is not the body, mind and intellect. Pure consciousness. Nanu, nanembudu, nanalla, ide, manabuddhi, nanalla, Sachidananda Atma, Shivanandani, Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the intellect. I am pure consciousness. And consciousness alone is there. The consciousness is called Brahman. This realization is self-realization. And there's no duality. There's only one reality, which is called Brahman. So few people come to that realization. So basically, self-suffering, self-improvement, self-transformation, self-transcendence and self-realization is what we call a spiritual journey.
Transcendence is not easy.
Transcendence is you're trying to transcend. You're going to go beyond. So that's where you do take up all spiritual practices. Transcendence is self-transcendence. For self-transcendence, you do practices like Atma no Mokshartam, Jagaditaya. Self-realization and selfless service is what to undertake. That's what you're transcending into. You're trying to transcend limited self. Finally, when you realize, it's called self-realization.